What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the TheIntroEntre podcast. I'm your host, BJ, and I have a special guy, man, a special friend, just somebody that if you don't know him, you need to know him. He's always been there for me. Anytime I ask him, I asked him to jump on this podcast. He's no problem. That's what friends do, man. That's what friends do, man. But I want everybody to please welcome Joseph, the CEO of Herald Charters, to the podcast, man. Thank you for jumping on, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Robert. Appreciate it.
No, not a problem, man. Not a problem, man. So, I was talking to you before. I wanted to make sure you understood that this is a conversation. I don't like to ask like these journalistic type questions because I'm not a journalist.
All right.
I'm just a guy wanting to know some information, man, and
All
you're a
right.
guy who has the information. So that's why we're talking, man. We're here to educate people, educate
All
me,
right.
educate the people around who took the time to listen to this pod, man. So I want you to, if you can, please give me a brief description of what do you do and what your business is.
Okay, I'll try to educate you guys. I'm not the smartest person, so
You're the smartest person I know.
well, we got some problems then, huh? So yeah, Herald Charters is an organization that I founded back in 2018 as a compilation, if you will, of what God told me I needed to do back in 2010 when I first decided I was going to do an airline. So my point back then was to do a airline to connect the feeders for the cargo airlines out to Hawaii.
What's the
And
feeders? What is that?
so like there's smaller airlines. So they fly small airplanes that are maybe the size of like a dump truck, if you will, or a tractor trailer. They're not much bigger than that. And so they're the airplanes that fly between smaller cities. So if you wanted to send a package from Columbia, South Carolina to maybe Jacksonville, Florida, it would go on a feeder aircraft because it's just much more economical and faster, truthfully, because it doesn't have to go back to the main hub. So that's what I was trying to do out in Hawaii. And God got a hold of me. It was like, no, that's not gonna fly, literally. So what we're gonna do?
No pun intended.
Right, no pun intended. So what we're gonna do is change this into a missionary aid type charter.
That's dope.
And so that's what we do. So our objective is to fly missionaries and aid workers from point A to point B without them having to take on the exacerbating and extremely uneconomical cost of flying with my current employers. But it's just to help offset the cost for them because it's so incredibly expensive to fly. And most missionaries and aid workers don't tend to have a primary job that can just fund a $2,000 ticket to Djibouti, if you will. And so our objective is to kind of offset that for them.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I don't know any. I don't know any plane charter company that just specializes in humanitarian aid like that. I think that's awesome, man. I wanted to do some humanitarianism. Is that the word, humanitarianism?
Yeah,
I
sure.
want
Let's
to
go
do
with
some
that.
aid work. Yeah, we'll go with
I
humanitarianism.
told you I'm not that smart, so you can't ask me silly stuff. I mean,
But I do, man. I want to do something so bad. And actually, I met this guy named Wes, man. Brilliant guy, too. And he, particular title in this organization, and all they do is send, like, aids to different countries. Man, I got to get him on the pod, too. And I got to hook y'all up, too. I think that'd be a great person for you to meet. Great brother, man. I honestly, helping people is what I want to do. Like, I don't care what my title is. I don't care what my job description is. If I can help or be a help to somebody else, I think that'd be awesome, man. I think that's part of my calling on this planet. I think that's everybody's calling is to
right.
to show, that they have that empathy for other people, man. So
I agree with that. I think most of us have that intrinsic desire to help other people. It's why you see people on the side of the road helping strangers with
yep,
flat tires and
yep,
things like that. And
yep,
because we have that desire to help other people, but we get lost in the shuffle of work, right?
yes,
And the everyday, um, if you will,
life,
hustle and bustle of
yeah,
life, right? And so, driving home from work, you may pass by that person because you're thinking somebody else is going to help them. I don't
yep,
have time right now,
yep,
right? But you don't not think, well, maybe some people do, but most of us don't think maybe I should stop and help that person.
yep,
But we just get caught up. I'm already late getting home. If I take this 30 minutes to help
yep,
this person, even though the spouse is going to be cool with it, I don't need to have to explain that. So I'm just going to press on,
exactly,
right? And
exactly,
so I think most of us do have a desire to help. And you see that when we're kids, especially, um, out on the playground or whatever, sharing toys
mm-hmm.
and helping push each other in the swing, and the merry-go-round is the greatest example, right?
Exactly,
People are on and people are pushing, and then you just
yep,
switch out, right? So everybody's helping each other, and everybody achieves the same goal of having the
yep,
most fun they can have without getting knees scratched up.
yep.
But
Or going the fastest on the
right,
merry-go-round. I
right.
always
Who
wanted to
can
go
go
the
the
fastest.
fastest, right?
Yeah. So take me back, because you told me you just started the business. You started Herald Charters in 2018, right?
Right, right.
So before that, you had the idea back in 2010 for
Yes,
what you wanted, for an iteration of what you wanted to do, right?
yes. So,
So
right.
I called that the Wantrepreneur stage. Like, I want to be
Okay.
an entrepreneur, but I'm putting the pieces in my mind. I'm putting all of that together, and you might go through several iterations of what is in your mind to what actually happens for you to start the business. So during that entrepreneur stage, like, what was going on in your mind? Like, were you taking steps to start the business?
um, yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that I guess I was taking steps to start the business. It doesn't matter what the perspective was, right?
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah, so I was taking steps to start because I was thinking, yeah, okay, this is
Mm-hmm.
something that I want to do because I've always wanted to have my own airplanes and I've always wanted to run an airline for as long as I can remember. And so I was under the idea that it doesn't matter what people are saying and how difficult they say it is, I'm going for it because
Yeah,
you don't know if you can do it unless you try,
unless
right?
you
And
try.
so even if you fail, you know that you've tried it. And so that's what I was doing. And so in 2010, after I had dropped the kids off to school, I was on the way back to work. A few months prior to that, we had just come back from a mission trip. And during that mission trip, I met this nice young lady. Her name was Angela. She was part of the mission team. And she kind of planted the seed in my head unknowingly about the charter thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
she was on the mission trip, still raising funds to pay for the ticket that she had just bought on her credit card. So she had maxed the credit card out to get the ticket to come, and
That's
now
a
she
bad
was having
feeling.
to raise funds. Right. And so, right. And so I was thinking, are you kidding? You're still raising money? And she's like, yeah, absolutely. How much can you donate? Well, whatever. How much do you still need? And she gave me the amount. And so we helped pay for her ticket. And
That's dope.
but that was the beauty of it. We had that capability
Yeah.
because of our job, right? But she wasn't. And so it kind of planted the seed there that there's no way that, and maybe he does, but in my belief, there's no way that God wants us to be worried about money
Money.
while we're
Yeah.
doing his work, right? And so the seed was kind of planted there. So fast forward to 2010, I'm dropping the kids off to work. I'm at school, I'm headed to work, and I'm going around the corner. And this was at Hick in Hawaii. And so I was going around the corner. I'm on the phone talking to an investor to get the airplanes to do the cargo feeder. And so while I'm talking to them, they were like, well, we're not really certain how it's going to look. Can you send us what it looks like on paper?
Mm-hmm.
What are the routes going to look like? They were all these great questions that
Yeah.
they should have been asking. And
Because
so
that's
I
their
got
money. Exactly.
right because it's their money, right? And so they want to make sure I'm not going to go buy a bunch of surfboards and just disappear. And
Yeah.
So I got to the office, I sent them the requirements. And while I was sending them that, my boss came into the office. He's like, Joseph, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm just getting ready to get started on the day. He's like, why are you here so early? And I explained all that to him. He says, do you have a minute? I want to talk to you about the mission trip that you went on and what it is that you're trying to do with your personal business, because I think that there's a niche that needs to be filled. And I was like, sounds like you're trying to talk me down off of right. So anyway, we go in and he talks and he's like, you went on a mission trip and you told me about this girl who had to pay for it. He said, why was it so heart-wrenching for you to have to deal with that? I said, because she shouldn't have had to do it. And I said, how can you fix that? And he said, that was the question I was going to ask you. What if you could fix it? And I thought for a second and I was like, well, somebody can fix it, but I'm working on these cargo airplanes right now, right?
Think about that later, yeah.
Right, I'll worry about that later. And the funniest thing happened. The investor, after I sent him the paperwork, he called back like 20 minutes after I sent the email. He's like, hey, this all looks really, really great. It's just not time for us to do this with you yet. And so I said, oh, okay. And so I walked back into my boss's office. I was like, well, what were you talking about? Because the investor said no. And so he's like, what are you talking about? And so anyway, long story short, I had a real heart-to-heart with God at the time. And he was like, the idea's there, but you got to roll with what I'm going to go with. And so I belabored the point a little bit that night and a few days, and hey, why don't we try to move missionaries and aid workers with these airplanes? And I tell you, it was a labor of love for the next 8 years, because some personal things happened in life, and moving back to the mainland, and then all those things happened. Once all the pieces got in place, it started to move a little bit better. So I was taking steps, but there was also a lot of back steps.
So lessons to learn.
Right, lessons to learn. Right. And so, I know that initially when I was thinking about how the business model would look and what it should look like in the processing, it was as if I was thinking, I should be able to get on I-10 and just drive straight, right, and get to the end point. It was more like getting caught up in the Chicago loop, right? In the middle of rush hour, and your steering wheel is stuck turning left. And so you're just making all these loops, right? And so the whole process was really, it was just a great learning process, but it was frustrating also, just because, like I said before, most of us think, especially myself, still sometimes today, I think, there's the target. That's where I'm going. Let's go, right? And as soon as we start going, it's like we hit a bump or catch a flat or something, and now we're over here and the target's off to the right, and it's like, but entrepreneurship from when you're starting out is not and never will be a straight line unless your intent is, what, I'm going to go outside to the park and sell every single one of these popsicles in my refrigerator. Well, that's being an entrepreneur also, but that's a very straight line, because you have the product, you have the resources, you have everything you need right there. But when you're starting with something from scratch, like even your podcast, right? When you're starting with something from scratch, it's a building process. And sometimes, just like during COVID, you have to wait on products and resources to arrive. And some of those products and resources are in people that you haven't met yet, and places that you haven't been yet. And so you just have to trudge along, I guess is the word I'm looking for, because it just doesn't.
You got to trust the path. You got to trust the process.
You got to trust the process, exactly. And that's in my mind, that's probably the most difficult thing for me, is to wait for the process to complete. Because if I know what it looks like and I know where it's going, why can't we just get there? Right?
So, you sound like me. I know the big picture. I can see it. I see all the details in this picture and everything. But it's the brush strokes along the way to get to the bigger picture. Is
Right.
those are the devils in the details, man. I hate the details. Oh,
Right. I don't like having to deal with the details. And
yes.
because of that, I feel like I was failing for 10 years to
Yeah.
get Herald off the ground, because it's like, okay, here's the business plan,
Hmm.
submit. Oh, look at that. I printed it. Now I got a business
Yep.
plan here. I'm going to present it to the brokers. And they're like, oh, your 5-year models don't make any sense.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, why are your 5-year models saying this? And oh, I went with these numbers based off of this, that, and the other. And they're like, that's 2005 information,
Yeah.
right? So the devil's in the details, because for me, it was relevant, but for them, they're like, no, we have the most current information. Here it is.
Exactly.
And so that was another thing I wanted to say about that process and the entrepreneurship stage, is a lot of times the failures, I think I had to start refocusing how I viewed them, because the failures weren't failures in a sense where the investors and brokers and everybody was saying no and just closing the door. They were saying no, here's why.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had to learn to synthesize that information and take it and put it into the business, because they were giving me essentially free advice
Free advice.
from
You're right. Free.
they were giving me free advice because I had already invested time and effort into it, and they didn't want, surprisingly enough, companies don't want to see other companies fail unless they're your direct competitor. And even then,
Yeah.
they would rather just buy you out than you fail, right?
Yeah.
So they were just kind of giving me free advice on how to make what I was thinking in the process better.
Hmm.
And it took 3 or 4 years for me to figure that out, that the investing group that I was talking to in Hawaii, when they said we're not able to do it right now, they weren't saying that it's not a good plan, go back to this marking board. They just said, hey, we can't do this right now because it just wasn't feasible for them.
Yeah. And you don't
Never
know what
want
that means. That might be money. That might be employee. Like they don't have the employee. They don't have something that they
right,
can
right,
give to you to make it work for
exactly.
both of y'all.
Right. And so it wasn't me and it wasn't them. It was really, I look at it as just the marketplace. The environment wasn't conducive for this project to grow. And so it's almost like having a baby
Yeah.
in the middle of the desert with no water. That's not a right. That's not a conducive environment for
No,
growth. Yeah,
not at all.
you can figure out ways to make it work, but it's going to be extremely difficult. And
Yeah.
so I had to learn that what they were telling me wasn't, hey, this is a terrible idea. What would make you think that you can do this?
Yeah.
They weren't saying any of that. They were just saying, this isn't the time. Have you considered this? Have you
Yeah.
considered that? And so they were helping build the foundational steps for what would later turn into Herald Charters. And
Yeah.
so, I think each and every one of them, I haven't actually thanked them, but I do thank them in principle,
Yeah.
said no, or when they said, hey, what is this about? And so, and then one other thing, and this was the most, take a deep breath, this was the most disappointing yet yet eye-opening thing about starting a business, right? Every book, every podcast, every internet site that says how to start a business, the number one thing that they all say is bootstrap it and talk to your family and friends about funding it.
Yeah.
All right. So I won't waste too much time on this, but
Tell them the real.
every friend, every family member, every friend and every family member is always on board. And then when you hit them with that donation and funding time, it's crickets,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it really, really, that set, just having that happen, because we were at a point back in 2016 to where we could have jumped, right? We were ready to do this. We were ready to buy airplanes. Everything was in place. I didn't know that COVID was coming.
Yeah.
Who knew, right? And so that's why it didn't happen that way. But looking back on it, mom, friends, family, hey, here's Herald Charters. We're ready to start. We're open for donations because we need to buy a simulator, and then we need to buy this, and we need to do that. Hey, it's a great idea. We don't have the funding right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. And so it made me go back and look at all these books because I'm thinking, man, maybe my marketing and presentation was wrong. But I think the reality is, it's just that if they understand the idea, but they don't understand the process, or if the end state doesn't necessarily meet one of their goals or objectives, there's no reason that they're going to invest in it, right? If there's no return on investment for them, nobody's going to do it. And so that was kind of heartbreaking. But again, it was one of those lessons learned where I get what the books are saying. And for the most part, I would say they're 70% right.
Yeah.
But if you're relying on your friends and family members to fund your business, then either your friends and family members need to be independently wealthy, or else they're going to be trying to do the same thing that you do, raise money to do this. And so I think that
popsicles in
while going selling popsicles in the park for years to raise funds for this, right? And I think the self-help books on how to start businesses I think they are well-meaning, but I don't think that every family has the capability to just drop $80,000 to $100,000 on a franchise fee.
Yeah.
Who has that? I mean, some people do, but most people who are trying to be entrepreneurs, there's a reason behind why they're trying to be entrepreneurs. Yeah. And it's not because their families are independently wealthy.
No. And a lot of those books, because I've read some of those books, and I'm not going to name any of them because they're helpful, but they're really written helpful, by people who might be in a different financial situation than me and my family are.
Right.
They might have a social class, a couple social classes. There's going to be at least 4 social classes above me to be able to afford some of these, startup costs of over $100,000. Because you talking $100,000. This has to be money that you already have set aside that you're not banking on coming right back.
That you can afford to lose.
Right. I don't know anybody growing up in my immediate circle that had any money to lose. We were really, I'm not gonna say poor, but these business opportunities weren't afforded to us because we didn't have the money to invest in them. So when people came to speak to a family member about a business, great idea. I don't have no money to put into this, so good luck. Let me know when when you at the top and you have the money, but by then it's too late most of the time, because a lot of times when I'm up, it's hard to reach down and look down, unless they have something that they can kind of bring to the table, man. So I really do, man. But that's the beauty of evolution, because I plan on having the funds at some point in my life to be able to donate or start a business myself, and not have to ask other people for the funds.
And that's kind of what I was. You were able to summarize everything I said in like 40 seconds, but.
I love long-winded answers, man. I love this, man.
but that's because I'm not smart, and it takes me a while to get my thoughts together. So
you sound like you're too smart because you got a bunch of stuff. See, I know.
Sound like Jacqueline right now. That's what she said.
So take me back take me back to 2018, and you're initially launching the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think entrepreneurship meant then? And follow up, what do you think it means now? Or are those two definitions different?
Okay, so that's a trick and loaded question. So, and I'm going to preface my statement with this to all the entrepreneurs out there that are coming and those who are still working. This isn't a dig at you. This was just my personal belief. Okay. And so it's not right, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And what my second statement will be more to y'all's liking. So I initially thought entrepreneurship prior to 2018 was those folks that I was talking about that come over here and get these popsicles and go sell them in the park, right?
Yeah.
I grew up when I was growing up, there was this kid, and I still to this day don't know what that kid ate for lunch, because his lunchbox every day would be full of now laters and gumdrops and the little sour heads and the Johnny apples. He had a lunchbox full of these things, and he was selling them to us at 50 cents and up a piece, right?
The little small candies, 50 cents.
The little small candies, right? And in retrospect, I'm thinking, man, that kid must have made a killing, because the Johnny Appleseeds even to this day only cost 75 cents for the box. So he was selling them for 50, right? So he was probably eating cheeseburgers and stuff on the way home from having made a killing off of us every day. But that was my idea of entrepreneurship, right? Somebody walking around with a lunchbox or a bag or something and just selling stuff and not really having any direction, if you will. They were just selling and being an opportunistic entrepreneur is what I viewed entrepreneurship as. And then my dad and mom started a business about halfway through high school. So in my sophomore year, and it changed my perspective a little bit, but not a whole lot, because their business wasn't a brick and mortar. They had a food truck, basically. It wasn't a food truck, but it was a grill that they took outside to the store, and the store allowed them to use the parking lot. And it was busy Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then they were done. No work on Sunday, and they, wash, rinse, repeat every week. And so it was kind of a hodgepodge of a business in my mind, but that gave me my first taste of what it was like to own your own business, and what the processes are, because I never understood for the 2 years prior why we were gathering parts of, what do we need this 55-gallon oil drum for, and why do you want me to cut it in half with the welder? It just wasn't making sense, right? And what do we need to go down here and pick up this piece of steel grating for? And so eventually all the pieces were there. He built the thing, he put it together, put it on a trailer. Oh, that's what this was, but I didn't have the vision, so it didn't make sense to me, right? So fast forward to 2018, we're getting ready to launch, and we're sitting down, and we launch. We send in the request for a nonprofit 501c3 with the IRS. We get that back. We get all of the requirements for the state of North Carolina and South Carolina to be a business. We get our bank accounts. We're going through the whole process. The whole thing is done. So, like we talked about before, that space between Wantrepreneur from 2010 to 2018 was 8 years of just getting all of those steel grates and drums to put this thing in place in 2018. And so it's going to sound really crazy, because just thinking about it right now, it took us 8 years to have a one-day launch. So
but everybody only has a one-day launch. Everybody,
right. That's true.
Yes.
But it took 8 years to get there. I felt like we were in obscurity, and then all of a sudden one day, bam, Herald Charters exist, right? And BJ, when I tell you this is not a dig at my bride, because I love her, not do anything.
I know you do.
She's literally the foundation of Herald Charters, and I tell you why. We press send. The next day we get our stuff. The stuff starts coming back. The IRS says, yes, here's your 501c3. Herald Charters is official. And she looks at me, she's like, this is cool. We should start a flight school. What are you talking about? She's like, Joseph.
That first day?
This is right. We haven't even finished day one launch yet.
Let's iterate already. Let's go ahead and get it.
Right. But she's a go-getter, man. Like she she is a go-getter. And if it pops up in her head, it's not just a whimsical thought. She's been thinking about this for a minute, right? And so from the first time I told her about Herald, she was probably thinking, Joseph is a great teacher.
Yep.
I'm a teacher.
Yep.
We need to teach the kids how to fly, right? Because there just aren't enough minorities, women, and underrepresented youth that know how to fly. So we need to teach them. And we have a platform now in our company to where we can spin off another company and teach them how to fly and create a workforce development program to where they learn how to do it in school. And then when they get done with high school, they can come over to the aviation part and instruct those kids now. And then when they get done with their hours, they can come work for Herald Charters and move on after that.
Shout out to Jacqueline for thinking about all of this.
Right. And that's what I'm saying, right? I was very myopic, right? I'm like, man, missionaries and aid workers, God's work, right? But
boom,
we're done. But like we talked about at the very beginning, everybody wants to help somebody, and that's intrinsic to us, right? And so in order to make more missionaries and aid workers, you have to train them and teach them early, or else you won't have them. And so Jacqueline is a nurse by trade, so she naturally just wants to help people, period. It's in her. And you should get her on here and she'll tell you about it, but it's just in her. For me, having grown up the way I grew up and then going into the military, I'm not so intrinsic on helping people because I grew up seeing this negative side effect of that. And so even though the intent is great, my mind was like, I'm not so certain about that. But when she looked at me, it was like 3:20 in the afternoon, and she's like, hey, we should start a flight school and we can teach the kids here on here how to do it. And I'm like, we haven't even, the paper's not even dry yet, right?
Not even put it on the wall yet.
Right, exactly. And so, but so now my idea of entrepreneurship is completely different. I mean, it's not even, I would say it's probably 180 degrees out from where it was, because now, and this is the craziest thing in my mind about it, once you submit all the paperwork and you start getting all the stuff back and you get the bank accounts and all of that stuff, and you just go through the checklist that's in those books that we talked about earlier, which those books are fantastic because those checklists are pretty on point. But when you go through all those checklists and you get done and you get down to the end of the day, that last part of the checklist, and you do it and you submit and you get all the paperwork back, you're still an entrepreneur. But any company, when the banks call you, when the IRS comes looking for you for some reason, they aren't looking for you as a person. They're looking for you as a business owner. So you're no longer an entrepreneur, you become a business owner. And so that process grows while you're waiting for that launch date. And on that launch date, if you want to have a connection to think about it too, when you launch, the first time you get your first customer, you're no longer an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. And so it's almost like graduating from college or high school or whatever. The next day you're at the next level, because now people here in a couple of months, people aren't going to come looking for, BJ, they're going to be looking for your podcast, right? So they aren't going to look in, hey, what's BJ's podcast? They're just going to look up what the podcast name is, right? And so when that thing happens in my mind, and this is why I said my view of entrepreneurship is so different. When that thing happens, when somebody looks up your company and not you, you're no longer an entrepreneur. You still have an entrepreneur mindset, but now you are a business owner. And that's a little bit different, because an entrepreneur in my mind is growing into that business owner, that corporation, that CEO. You're growing into that. And then once it happens, now your mindset expands and broadens, because you're no longer thinking about launching and how to make this work. You're thinking about how do we branch out and how do we make it work from the internal perspective, instead of, you're no longer thinking about the resources that I need to get started. You're thinking about, what do I need now for sustainability? And that's that's the transition. I'm not sure when it happens, but for me, it happened right around the time when Jacqueline says, we need to start a flight school. Okay. Because she
Yeah.
didn't say Joseph, you, she didn't say I, she said we, Herald Charters needs to start a flight school. And so that transition in my head was like, wow, that's a great idea. How do we do that?
Yeah.
Because that is something that will help us sustain, right? Before, I would have never considered that because there's no chance that it would help us because it's an expenditure, right?
Yeah.
So as an entrepreneur, you need things coming in. You need more stuff coming in than your expenditures. But when you get to that point in entrepreneurship and you become that president, that CEO, that business owner, that corporation owner, when you become that person, you ideally should have enough resources in to where your expenditures won't hurt the company.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, there's a transition that takes place. And I'm not sure when it happens for certain people, but at some point it happens. Jeff Bezos was at one point an entrepreneur. Bill Gates was at some point an entrepreneur, but now we refer to them as Microsoft and as Amazon, right?
Exactly.
Right. We talk about them in relation to their business. We don't talk about them in relation to who they are as entrepreneurs. And so there's a transition point. I'm not sure where that transition point happens, but it's somewhere between launching and the realization that you have the capacity and capability to go statewide, regional, global. And so I'm sure that it takes place at some point different for everybody, but for me, it was just a simple question. And it was like, oh, I guess
let's go.
We're here, go. Right? Yeah. we're here. Right.
That's dope, man. Like I said, shout out to Jacqueline, man. She's another person that hopefully will be on the pod soon. But just her mind, man. It doesn't turn off. It just keeps going. It does not turn off.
And it doesn't, man.
No, and it's different. It's like it can be something today, and then tomorrow, oh, what if we add to that something? And then the next day, it's like, well, that's something that we added to is this, and then we're gonna go. I was like, man, she is great with that, man.
Right,
everybody needs somebody like that.
I'm telling you right now, she is not the person that I would try to connect the dots with. Because I see the point, right? I'm just gonna go.
Yeah.
And Jacqueline's like, well, the easiest way is to do this, and this, and this, because you can pick these resources along the way. And I'm thinking, forget the resources, get to the point. But her brain is just, it's a unique thing, man. I'm thankful that she's on my team. That's all I can say.
Exactly, man. That's dope. So, what interests you? What got you interested in flying? Have you always wanted to be a pilot?
Yes, not even joking. Yes. So there was two things I wanted to be in life: a pilot and a firefighter. I have no idea why. I mean, because most pilots don't like firefighters because of the implication, right? But
yeah, makes sense. Perfect sense.
Right. So I don't know why I wanted to be on the far end of the spectrum, but I was sitting on the back porch when we lived in Chicago with my dad, and the dog was running up and down the stairs, and my dad was telling me something about the dog, but I was like just looking out the window, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm looking at this airplane over here. I want to fly that." And he was like, "You can do anything. Dope. If that's what you want to do it." Yes. And so I turned around and looked at him like, "What?" And his face was deadpan serious. Yeah. Right. And it was probably one of the first times in my life that I can remember making eye contact with my dad and feeling what he was saying. Yeah. Ooh, right. Powerful. And yeah. And so so from that point forward, man, it was very myopic, a very singular dream, right? Just this is what we're gonna do. So we moved to Alabama, and they found mentors for me in Tuskegee to get into the aviation community and fly. And of course, we didn't have money because we just didn't have the money. We didn't have the resources. So every book I could get my hands on, or that they could get their hands on, was at the house about to learn about
Yeah.
flying, and we had we had two sets of encyclopedias, and I'm telling you, I'm not even joking. I read every single one of them, but especially the ones in the A for aviation
Yeah.
and airplanes. I read the weather ones and all the stuff about. So I knew those books like it was the back of my hand,
Yeah.
and so that was how I got involved with it. And they just, I wouldn't say they we didn't have the resources to fund the dream, but they funneled the dream,
Yeah.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? So they wouldn't let me deviate too far from it, because when I told him that, a couple of days later, we're driving home from work, and he hands me this bag from up in the front seat, and it's a little bitty model airplane from Delta Airlines, right?
Oh,
Right, right. You know the ones that they used to give out on the
yeah.
airplane,
On the
right?
little airplane. Yeah.
Yeah. So he handed me one of those, and it wasn't even in the box. It was just the airplane, but I didn't care
Yeah.
that it wasn't new.
Yeah.
I was like, "This is cool, right?" And so, what does every kid with an airplane in the car do? Let the window down, hold it out. We're flying, right? We're flying. Um, and so that's how it all got started, and they just helped steer the dream.
Steer
They
the dream.
never, yeah, they
That's
never let me deviate too far from it.
that's a big point. Like, especially when you're a child, having somebody believe in you enough to help you mold your mind into thinking
Right,
that you're able to do it. You know, a lot of times we don't have. A lot of times we don't express what we want to do. First of all,
right,
then the times that we do express, we're met with people who have to work at a job that they hate, so they don't understand that they can be anything that they want to be.
right.
They think that they have to put their head down, work this job so I can put this person or pay these bills. I don't have the luxury of being able to believe in something because I'm so knee deep in my life in this world that
Right,
I can't even fathom the dream to want to be something else. And
right.
that's terrible, especially in the community that we grew up in.
Exactly.
The more that we can educate ourselves, the more we can educate the other people about the different types of jobs, different types of dreams that you can have, man. I think the better off we will be as a society. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And what you're saying is spot on. It happened in our household,
Mm-hmm.
around, I think it was in 11th grade, right? The schools and they had the career day at school, if you
Yep.
will. And it's where all the colleges and things come, and they recruiting students basically. So I walked up to the Navy because Top Gun had just come out like a couple of years before.
Yeah.
I went up to the Navy and I was like, "Hey, I want to fly airplanes." And they're like, "Oh, you might be able to drive a sub." And I was like, "Deuces." So I'm not driving no submarine.
Nah.
I don't think you heard what I said. We went
That's
the
the
opposite
totally end of the
direction.
spectrum. I want to
Right,
be up
right,
here. You trying to
exactly.
put me down here?
Right. The terms are the same, but
Yeah.
it's a completely different perspective, right? And so I didn't do that, but I went home and I told my mom after, we didn't have the internet. So it was, these card catalogs,
You
these
heard that,
book
kids?
catalogs.
We did not have the internet.
Yeah.
We had to look in books.
We had to look in books, right? So I was looking in this book and for the colleges, and I was just looking at University of Alabama, Roll Tide, and I was like, what is this detachment thing that it's talking about? And then so I went and I had to go find out what the detachment thing was, and it turns out that it was the Air Force ROTC program. And so I told her and my dad, said, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to join the Air Force ROTC program. And my mom was like, yeah, you're going to do what? You're going to join the military? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, why? Because in her head, fresh off of Vietnam,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, there
Totally
ain't
different.
no,
Yeah.
it's a different perspective, right? And so she was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And Robert, when I tell you that all it took me to say was, but I could be a pilot in the Air Force and it won't cost me anything.
I'll drop you off. That's the next word. I'll drop you off.
What time does class start? Right. And even to this day, she would tell you, my mom would tell you, and I think you got a chance to talk to her at the Jubilee event that we
Oh,
had,
that's the
but
Jubilee, yes, yeah.
yeah, she would tell you to this day that she did not, and the entire time I was in the military, she was not comfortable
Yeah.
because, I mean, it's the military, right?
Yeah.
But she was extremely happy, conversely, because I had achieved the dream, right? I
Yeah.
had now become a pilot and I was flying and doing everything, but it was just, they were very, I can't thank them enough for how
Yeah.
singularly focused they were, and my dad was the firefighter. So I didn't have to do that. All I
You
got to do
lived
now
through
is be a
them.
pilot, right? Yep. That's the firefighter. I can
Yeah.
be close enough to the smoke. Okay, I'll be a
Yeah.
I'll be a
I'm good.
pilot, right?
I'm good.
Right. And so, but in our community, you're absolutely right. And I experienced that, man, if it wasn't once every month,
Yeah.
I wasn't even there. Where somebody's like, hey, what do you want to do? What are you thinking about doing? I want to be a pilot in the Air Force, or I want to be a pilot. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, I'm going to be an aerospace engineer first, and da 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 da. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, that's really hard. You got to be really smart to do that. Well, what are you saying to me right now?
Yeah.
Right? Are you
Yep.
are you trying to kill my dream, or are you trying to promote it by saying that I
Exactly.
need to be smarter? Which one are we doing here? Because either way, it's not coming off right.
Yeah.
And so they I think a lot of people in our community, especially, like you said, they don't like their job,
Yeah.
and they're inadvertently dream killers
Yeah. Oh
because of
yeah.
that. And so
Yeah.
when somebody says, oh, this is something I want to do, they don't see the they don't see the end state. All they see is the path to get there,
Yeah.
if you will, right?
Yeah.
So I was in the man, it was early high school, and some of my friends and I were going to play basketball, right? And there was construction up the road, and so we couldn't drive, and so we had to like walk, right? And I was like, hey, we can just walk across this field because the court is right there, and we can just come back when we get done and we'll be here. And they're like, there's briar patches out there, man. I'm like, but the basketball court is right there. And they're like, but how are we going to cross the briar patches? I'm like, the court is right there, right? And so my point in that is that some people just aren't capable of seeing the end state.
Yeah.
They only can see the preventative methods in between you and there. And so, once I just started walking across, they were like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll follow him.
Yeah.
Right.
But they're not going to take that leap first. They're not.
They're not going to
Yeah.
take the leap first, right? Because they can't see
Yeah.
how to overcome the obstacle because
Exactly.
they've never tried to overcome that obstacle before, right?
Exactly.
They were only accustomed to, I'm going to go all the way up the
Yep.
street, make the right turn, drive another half a mile, then make another right turn, a right turn. When we could have just walked across we could have been walking across that field for
For
years, right?
years.
For years, right?
Years.
But it wasn't until the necessity required it that we did it. And even when necessity required it, they were still hesitant to do it because it hadn't been done before.
Nobody has ever done it before. Exactly.
Right.
I wanted to be a pilot, for maybe a year. I think it was my junior year.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be a pilot. So me and my mom, I remember we took the trip down to Daytona, and Emory Riddle was a prominent aviation school. I don't know if it still is,
It
um,
is.
but we took the trip down to Emory Riddle. We got the tour. Uh, we saw the campus, beautiful campus down in Daytona. I think it's right on the beach too. It was nice.
It
So
is.
yeah, it's nice. Um, then we got hit with the costs, and that was a slap in the face. Like, oh, where are you getting this money from? And
Right.
then I wasn't the best student in high school, so my GPA wasn't the greatest. So I was like, man, hey, listen, this is a great dream, but the dream is just going to have to be deferred now. But
Right.
it never entered my mind. Well, first of all, I didn't have the money to go to college, so I didn't even think about the ROTC or anything like that to be able to indirectly go to I guess the point that I wanted to go to. So is there is do you see the military as being another way, I guess a non-traditional way to become a pilot? Is that a path that a lot of people take?
I would say it's probably 50-50. I
Yeah.
would say probably 50% of the pilots in the workforce, maybe even less. When I say workforce, I'm talking about the aviation community, the commercial
Yeah.
aviation community. I would say probably somewhere 40 to 50% of them were prior military, and the rest went through some other means. Uh, man, I, as much as I love the military and I'm thankful for all that they've provided for me in my life and gave me the opportunity to be a pilot and get pilot training for free and get
Yeah.
all of my, they legitimately pay for every
Everything.
single one of my licenses. I mean, every single one of them. um, but it came at a cost, right? I had to give them 10 years.
Yeah.
And so I, I will caveat that with, absolutely, the military is the way to go. If you can get a pilot slot, it's absolutely the best way to go. However, you do have to be willing to do what it is that they tell you
Yeah.
you're going to do, when you're
Everything
going
they
to
tell
do
you to
it,
do.
where
Exactly.
you're going to do it
Exactly.
for at least 10 years. Because um, right, wrong, or indifferent,
Mm-hmm.
the whole purpose of the military is to protect and serve our country, right?
Yeah.
And so to defend the borders against enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yep.
And so um, if if that's not something that you think you can do long term, then, I mean, when I say long term, I mean 10 years,
Yeah.
because that's the commitment. Then I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend you find another way. But that would be, I would say, that is the non-traditional way to become a pilot, to go to the military.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's how I did it. I mean, they pay for everything.
Yeah.
And it was, but I didn't look at it from that perspective, because when I joined the military, I wanted to fly. I initially, like I said, I wanted to fly F-14s because I mean, Top Gun. I mean, who didn't
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
fly
I
F-14s
wanted to
after
fly
seeing that?
F-14s, man.
Right. I mean, right. And so for me, having always wanted to fly my whole life, the F-14s, the military was just a
Yeah.
means to an end, because if I can go and fly, objective achieved, I will serve any country,
Yeah.
right? I will do whatever it is that you tell me.
I'll serve any country.
I will do whatever it is that you tell me, if you tell me I can fly. And
Yeah.
that was my mindset as a 20-year-old kid, right? And so, looking back on it, I would do it the same.
Yeah.
Just because it was financially the only way that I would
Yeah.
have been able to be a pilot.
Yeah.
There's no questions asked there, because that $90,000 in today's money is just, for my parents at the time,
Yeah.
that's a year and a half of their salary. I mean, there's no way we would have been able to afford that.
And
And
that's
so
without paying the mortgages, without paying the bills, without doing anything else.
right,
It's just
right. And I
ridiculous.
mean, you're skipping out on, you're right. I mean, you're just paying for flight training
Yeah.
only. And so there's no way. And so, I didn't know what I didn't know,
Yeah.
but I knew that when we got to Tuskegee, which was a much cheaper cost of living than Chicago, and it was still expensive to fly, I knew that I'm not going to be able to do this unless I find an alternative
Traditionally. Yeah.
means. And for me, that means was I have to go serve my country for what ended up being 16 years. And so, my pleasure. Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, man. So I'm a come down to the last couple questions. I don't want to keep you on
All
here too
right,
long, but
man. I got all day.
listen, I don't because I already why I was up here talking. I got the look like, all right, is you got to go pick up
Right.
Trey from school. What are you going to
Right.
do?
Okay.
Yeah. I was trying to. I saw her, but I didn't want to look because I knew I was going to get the eyes.
Right. Right.
So I was like, I'll go. Don't worry, I got it. Yeah, give me if you can, give me. If you giving me a lot of great information, I appreciate it. But if you had two keys to your entrepreneurial success that you can share with people, what would they be?
Write a business plan.
Mm.
And I'm not talking about on your cell phone, on your iPad. Grab a computer from somebody set your cell phone down, put your iPad away, and start writing your business plan, because
Yeah.
you need to be able to defend your idea or whatever it is that you have for your business. And there's no better way to hash out what the problems are going to be than writing it down.
Yeah.
And the reason I say do it on a computer is because on your iPhone, how many times have you been on your phone working on something, maybe paying a bill, right? And you get a text message from, I guess, Marin, or in my case, Jacqueline, right? And you like click on it. Okay, now you're dealing with this.
Now
and
that's
you
my
forget,
focus. Yeah.
right, your focus is gone, right? So if you can do it on a computer, and I know that MacBooks and computers are also tied in, but if you just, I think that just writing it out on a business plan on a computer where you don't have the dings and the whistles and things that are distracting you, I think that would help you immensely as an entrepreneur, because as you're writing it, you'll be thinking about what's my next step, right? So step one, write the business plan. Step two, publish the business plan. Step three, okay, we got to mail it. Step four, okay, we got to find investors. And so you'll step through all of those things where if you're doing it on your phone, right, it's already built in. And so you don't have to think about anything, right? And so the first day you're on that elevator and somebody's like, hey, what do you do? And you're trying to give them an elevator pitch and they say, well, how'd you come to that conclusion? You're stumped because you haven't had a chance to think about it. So I would say write a business plan, write it out, and change your view on criticism. Change the view on criticism.
Oh, that's a great
on
one.
how you receive it.
That's a great one.
Because, like I said before, right, those investors and people that were saying, "Hey, have you thought about this?" They weren't saying that it was a bad idea. They were just giving me free pointers on how to make my product better when it was able to be launched. And so, if you will, they were the BASF of my business plan, right? They didn't make it, but they made it better by criticizing it and making me think and focus on, okay, you're right. That is a giant hole in the wing that I need to fix. So how do I fix it, right? And so, so once you change your view on the criticisms that you get about your business plan and about your business model or your idea, and see it as more of a, hey, I'm trying to help you, and this is the only way that I can help you by saying this or saying no right now. Because if I were to give you $500,000 to start this business, but you haven't found a financial manager,
it's a wrap.
Right. Right. That's it. Right. I'm coming to you next year saying now you owe me $750,000 because you haven't returned any money on the investment over the last couple of months like you were supposed to at 20%. Now you owe me all this money. So I would say those are two things.
Listen, you know, that lesson number two is a lesson everybody has to learn. I had to learn it, you know, but the point of the lesson is, I think, one point, there's several, but one point of the lesson is you're not going to get what you asked for right then. Usually you're going to have to go back and think about it, or, you know, you're going to have to iterate a little bit. Most people, I think, when they think of entrepreneurship, they think they've written a business plan and people are just supposed to jump on board right then and just like cash is just going to be thrown in your face or something like that.
Right.
They don't understand you're dealing with these people's money. Like, they want their money back. They want a return on their money. This is business. This is serious. You're not getting, especially if you have no experience in pitching and getting these pitch decks and things of these natures ready for people, you will not get what you want the first time you ask. It's not going to happen. The best companies pitch for months. They pitch several times. I remember watching something on Uber. Uber went through several rounds before they got their initial investment. And it's not you're a bad company. It's, well, what about this? When you expect this? And give me some more information. And if you don't have that more information, it's okay for them to say, hey, no, you can't have my money right now. But most of the times, if it was a good interaction, you can go back to these people and say, hey, I thought about this from what you said last time. This is the answer to your question.
Right.
They might have more questions after that, but it's not just a slam in your door and slam your face in the door and a no completely. It's,
Right.
hey, go get some more information and then come back, and then come
Right.
back.
And you just touched on something. Once you make that initial contact and they give you the time of day to give them a pitch, if they say no, get their business card
Yeah,
or get their phone number and say, hey, I'm going to call you back,
yeah,
and then follow up on that call
yeah.
back. Because if you don't ever call them back, you're never not going to know what they were
Never
going to be
know.
able to do for you. But if
Never
you
know.
call them back in 6 months to a year and say, hey, I'm ready to pitch again, they might be like, oh, okay, have you
Yeah,
fixed this part? Yes. And then
sure
have you
have.
taken care of this? Okay, well, come on in, right? But
Yep.
if you never ever follow up with them, you can absolutely guarantee that they're not going to invest.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly, man. So, where do you see yourself or the business in the next 2 years?
um, whew. Well, we just bought a simulator. It's actually supposed to get delivered this week.
Congratulations on that.
Thank, thank you. That's actually a huge step because it's an FAA certified simulator,
Mm,
so we'll be able to do instruction essentially right away for
great.
students in the
Yeah.
Charlotte-Mecklenburg area. Um, so, and then we're supposed to be trying to close on an airplane sometime next week.
Th-
We lost a bit last week on a G3,
Oh, you
but
did.
yeah, we did. It's okay. It's all right. But we're gonna we're gonna start on Jacqueline's part first and
Yeah.
build up
Yeah.
because there's no point to have carrier aircraft that can move missionaries and aid workers if we
Yeah.
don't have people to actually fly them.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
we're gonna buy within the next 2 weeks. We're gonna buy two trainer aircraft for the students to get started. And so we'll have the simulator, we'll have the trainer aircraft. So within the next 2 years, I expect us to have a couple of airplanes, a couple of simulators, a location, brick and mortar location at some
Mm,
airport here in the area. Rock Hill has already told us that we can come there. So we'll flesh that out. So within
yeah.
the next 2 years, I expect us to be actually putting out our first, I shouldn't say putting out, that sounds bad. We should be finishing up with our first set of high school graduates that start the program fresh
Yeah.
as sophomores. So we should be finishing with those students and sending them on to college or whatever the career field is of their choice, because like I said, it's a workforce development program.
Yeah.
And we also have a very, very high STEM focus. And so we're going to try to tap into all of the local schools here and let them know that, hey, these kids are ready to go and they've done this part, they've done this. Can you give them an acceptance?
Yeah.
And so I expect that to be within the next 2 years,
Mm.
something to that effect. Hopefully, we have a lot of partnerships with American Airlines and Delta and the
Yeah.
like. So
Those are great goals, man. I know if there's any two people that I know that can accomplish those goals, it's you and Jacqueline. So I
all
have
right.
no doubt in my mind
Thank you,
that
sir.
that you have those things coming to you. So,
Thank you.
and how can people, like, if people have kids or there's students that are watching this that want to get involved or want to come do the flight simulator or get in the program, like, how
Mhm.
do they contact you to get involved?
They can go to our website at www.herald, one word.com. And you can go on there and just send us an email, or you can just you can register for ground school on there,
Hmm.
and we'll respond back. I think it said that 69% of the time we respond within an hour. So we'll respond back pretty quickly.
Pretty quick.
But you can go to our website. If you don't have the capability to go to a website, you can go to any Boys and Girls Club in the Charlotte Mecklenburg area and ask them about our program, and they'll be able to put you in contact with us because we have a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club of
Cool.
America.
That's real cool.
So
That's real cool, man. So, man, Joseph, I really, really, really appreciate you jumping on here for me, man. I wanna, like, my whole everything in my body is to help people. Like that's just me. I want to help everybody, and one of the ways I feel like I can help was to start a podcast, was to bring dope people on here like yourself, and help educate people by having you speak on everything that you have going on. Because, like I said, I probably would have had a different path to life if I knew a lot of things were available to me. I
Right.
want to be able to showcase other people, so people that are watching have they have something tangible to dream about, like becoming a pilot, owning a flight simulator to help educate people. These are the things that I want to help and beat in people's heads that you can do anything you want on this earth. You just have to go
Absolutely
after it.
anything.
You
Right.
have to go after it. It's
Right.
not going to just fall in your lap. There's steps that you're going to have to take. They might be uncomfortable steps, but anything uncomfortable does not last forever. So
Right. Right.
get involved. Listen. If you, I want to. This is something that I'm going to do hopefully soon. Is because on the website I was looking on the website. There is a 159 flight, like a 30-minute flight that people can
Yeah.
take, and they're going to actually be
Right.
in control of the
Right.
airplane.
Right. So yeah, that's a discovery flight. Anybody can
Yeah.
sign up for that. The older you are, the better, truthfully.
Is there
There's no
a age requirement?
there's no age requirement. However,
You got to be
you
able to
do
touch
have
the
to
pedals,
you
at
have to be
least.
able to reach the pedals, right?
Okay.
So it's more of a height requirement than it is an age requirement. I'll have to look up what the height requirement is, and I'll send that to you
Okay.
because I don't know what it is right off the
I'm
top of my
tall
head.
enough. I can
Yeah,
guarantee you I'm
yeah.
tall.
We're definitely going to get you going. We're gonna. You know what? Here's the deal. For letting me participate in your podcast, you get to go up on your discovery flight for free, and maybe you can do the podcast from the flight. How
From the
about that?
flight, that's dope.
Yeah.
Listen,
There you
we
go.
going we scheduling that now. I'm
All
about to
right.
clear my
All
schedule
right.
for that now.
All right. Yep. So we'll do that. So you heard it here first, folks.
Yes,
If
yes,
Robert has to pay for his discovery flight, then
yes.
that's my bad. Um, um, so yeah, we got to get you up. But yeah, you can do a $159 flight for 30 minutes, and you get to do you do everything. You're right.
Yeah.
You do a ground school for 30 minutes beforehand, and that's just to kind of because we're not teaching you how to be a pilot all of
Yeah.
a sudden. We're just teaching you how to fly the airplane in
Yeah.
that instant, right? So we give you a 30-minute ground school on basic controls, aircraft maneuvers, and things like that. Then we go out and we do the pre-flight for you, but you do it with us. You walk around because, of course, we have to follow FAA inspection rules. And then we get in the airplane. You crank it up. You taxi. You take off. You fly, and you land. And
I'm getting excited.
yeah, we're flying along with you to make sure that everybody's safe, and that you get to go home and live to tell the story and get other people involved.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend everybody do that if you want to be a pilot. Unless you absolutely know that you want to be a pilot and there's nothing that's going to stop you, then use that $159 towards your first flying lesson.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would highly recommend everybody, even if you don't want to be a pilot, do a discovery flight, because Jacqueline did a discovery flight and now she wants to get her private pilot's license.
Man, listen, because that has to be so cool. Life will change if you are in the sky in control of a aircraft. If you don't know what you want to do at that moment, and if you ever had an inkling of being a pilot, I'm pretty sure once your hands are in control of that airplane, you want to be a pilot.
You want to be a pilot.
You're sold,
Yep.
man. Well, thanks,
so
Joseph. Man. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Let's figure out a date to get you up.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then,
I'm coming. That's a wrap.
see if we can get the podcast going from the flight.
Yes.
I'll do the flying while you do the podcast, of course.
Yeah.
But then,
we'll turn it off after a while because I want to fly the plane.
Well, you're gonna get to fly.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get to ask the questions while you're flying.
Oh, that'd be dope. I can do that.
All right.
Well, thanks, Joseph, for jumping on the pod, man. Like I said, man, you're a brilliant guy, man. I love you. I really do appreciate everything that you have done for me and will continue to work with me on, man. Everybody, listen. If you have ever wanted to be a pilot, if you're in Charlotte, North Carolina, if you're not in Charlotte, if you're in if you're in a 3 hour driving range to get to Charlotte, man, I want you to go to heraldcharters.com. Click on what is called, Joseph, flight simulator,
Flight instruction, flight
flight
training.
flight training. I want you to take the $159 training. Go up in the sky. Get Feel what it feels like to be in the air, in control of an airplane, and having your life in control of your own hands. So I want everybody jump on Harold. And you, I'm sorry to jump off track, but there's also a place on heraldcharters.com where they can go and donate uh, to what, a scholarship or something like that, Joseph?
Right. So you can select whatever it is that you want the donation to go to. You can select scholarships. You can select a specific student in the program, which we haven't listed those students because we don't know who they are for the coming year. But you can select a specific student. You can select that you want to go towards an aircraft purchase, a simulator purchase. So we're going to take the simulator purchase down because we have one now. But
Okay.
you can designate whatever you want it to go to, or you can just say whatever we feel
Yeah.
need is. But yeah, we didn't want to limit people on what their options were. So you can actually designate what your donation goes to, and you don't have to do anything. As soon as you log in the first time, it pops up there to donate. And if you swipe it away or you don't donate, then you'll have to clear the cache to do it again, or you can select donate up in the top right corner.
And that's awesome, man. So yeah, listen, take the flight simulation, do that. But if you're
Absolutely.
unable to get to Charlotte, I want you to at least go to heraldcharters.com and, out the kindness of your heart, donate at least $10. Okay, at least.
I like
okay.
it.
Yeah, all right.
Right.
Man, I appreciate it, Joseph. Man, that's going to be a wrap for the TheIntroEntre podcast.